Rosa, hindi sasama si Shield?
Next ko pero hindi nag-reply. Baka nasa meeting pa nga.
Grabe kami dito sabay-sabay. May nag-online virtual school, dalawa. Si Abby nasa meeting, Zoom. Talagang ito ng new normal natin.
Oo. Ako okay lang. Ayoko lumabas ng bahay.
Oo nga eh. Okay, ayoko na rin. Hindi na ako lalabas.
Yung hands ko nga sobrang dry na. Tapos kung ano, nagkakaroon na ng kung ano.
Okay, we're live.
Ay, ayan na live.
That's not fair.
Okay, good evening to everyone. Just for the sake of yung mga first time na mag-review, this is Attorney Jean Bagsic from New Zealand. And yung topic natin for tonight is how to become a New Zealand barrister and solicitor. Now, just like what I've written on the post, kasi medyo outdated ng aking knowledge, kasi it has been more than a decade since I've done the qualifications and exams. So I invited two of my legal staff in Bagsic Law. So is si Attorney Josiah Ino Garcia and si Attorney Benjamin Ruste. Okay?
Hi.
And yung nakita yung tatlo, that's my classmates na gustong malaman daw, want to ask questions in person about New Zealand, becoming a barrister solicitor, si Attorney Rosa Mendoza Martelino, si Attorney Maria Mislang, and Attorney Glenn Albano. Hi, good evening, Glenn, Rosa, and Maria. Lulu, Maria tuloy ako, no?
Hello.
Okay.
Good evening there.
Dahil medyo na-pressured ako, dahil maraming abogado na viewers, nag-prepare ako ng isang PowerPoint presentation. Okay? Now, I'm just gonna upload it now. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint now? So how to become a New Zealand barrister and solicitor. Okay. Now, just for a start, I want to discuss yung New Zealand Law Society, which is the government regulatory body for barristers and solicitors. And you can visit their website. It's www.lawsociety.org.nz. And they are the regulatory body in charge of the admission, suspension, and disciplinary actions of barristers and solicitors. Okay? They also are in charge of the professional development, yung mga CLE, just like sa Pilipinas. And it's the IBP equivalent sa Pilipinas. So now, the most common question I get is, ano yung difference ng barrister and solicitor compared to what we have in New Zealand? Now, maraming technical differences, but to put it more to put things simpler, siguro basically barrister are lawyers who would appear in court, and solicitors would be lawyers who would be mostly doing paperworks or hindi mostly courtrooms. So yun yung very, very basic difference. But there are more specific and more detailed mga differences. Pero let's not go into there. But just to give you a sort of like a brief overview, yun lang yung basic differences nila between a barrister and solicitor. Pero some lawyers in New Zealand have a barrister as a certificate, yung parang license sila. Some have both barrister and solicitor, and some would have solicitor. Okay, so depending on the nature of your employment or the nature of your employer, kumbaga. Okay, now, Ben, do you want to discuss about the NZCLE?
Okay. The New Zealand Council of Legal Education po ay sila po yung independent body na nag-handle ng mga assessment ng mga legal qualifications ng mga overseas lawyers. At sila, tapos yung pag-assess po ng mga qualifications natin, nandun na rin po sa website nila, nakalagay na po doon yung application form at yung mga requirements po. So, pwede lang po kayo pumunta sa website nila na nakalagay na po sa PowerPoint at hanapin nyo lang po yung Overseas Qualifications na tab. Tapos may link po doon. Tapos kailangan nyo lang i-download yung document at nakalagay na po doon yung mga procedures at requirements para ma-assess na po yung mga legal qualifications natin dito sa New Zealand.
Okay. Now, let's go to the mga specific requirements. Ben, kasi you did this very recently, diba? So you want to discuss about those documents?
Okay. Ito po yung mga documentary requirements na nakalagay dun sa sinabi ko po kanina na assessment ng overseas legal qualification natin. Una-una po yung cover letter. Simple letter lang po yun na nag-explain kung ano yung background natin at ano po yung purpose natin sa pag-apply ng assessment natin sa New Zealand. Tapos yung application form po, nakalagay na po yan sa Schedule 1, Section A ng document na mada-download natin sa website nila. So, nandun na po yun. Ang i-fill out na lang po natin yung mga questions dun, like name natin, date of birth, mga address, and then yung evidence of payment of fees po, yun lang po yung receipt na kailangan natin i-attach sa application natin. Yan po ay in New Zealand dollars, 1,375 at 1,640. I think without GST pa yan. Pero kung final po natin yung assessment natin dito sa New Zealand, with GST pa yan. So madadagdagan pa.
So, just for the sake of our viewers, Ben, yung GST is parang VAT sa Philippines, no?
Yeah. Goods and services tax po yan dito sa New Zealand. Sa atin, value-added tax. Kung dito nyo final yung application for assessment nyo, yung 1,375 magiging 1,581. Yung 1,640 magiging 1,886. So, mas cheaper kung na-file nyo yan outside New Zealand para walang GST. Tapos, yung next requirement, yung statutory declaration or affidavit, nakalagay na po yan yung statement po na kailangan nandyan sa affidavit, nakalagay na po sa document na yan at kailangan lang man-notarize. So, readily available na po yan sa document na ida-download nyo, ikokopya nyo na lang po sa ikokopya tapos ipapanotarize na lang po. Tapos certified copy of marriage certificate or statutory declaration if name po natin ay different dun sa ating mga documentary requirements like yung mga transcript natin from school, passport, tapos certified copy of first 2 pages of passport. So, kailangan lang ma-certify at saka yung birth certificate natin. Tapos, passport photo imported dapat within 6 months. Tapos, yung CV din, kailangan din natin i-attach po sa application natin. And then next ay...
Siguro, Ben, balikan ko lang yung certified true copy of marriage certificate kasi I just want to share na dito kasi sa New Zealand, hindi sila sanay sa, di ba sa Pilipinas, once a Filipina or a woman in the Philippines gets married, ina-adapt niya yung family, yung surname ng husband. And then dinadrop yung original na middle name niya and the middle name becomes yung surname nung father niya. So parang ganun yung practice and tradition sa Philippines. Now in New Zealand, they're not used to that kind of tradition or change of name. Sa kanila sa New Zealand, they are familiar or they adopt a practice of yung first and middle name mo doesn't change, they stay the same. Pag nag-asawa ka, dapat ang mag-change lang yung last name mo. So parang I always get that question or parang clarification from immigration or from New Zealand agencies in case of change of name ng mga married women from the Philippines. Okay? Now, next page.
Yung next requirement, certified copies of tertiary academic records. Yun po yung mga transcript of records natin na issued by the school, sa law school natin, at degree certificate. So in my case, in-attach ko po rin din yung diploma, pero certified true copy lang, hindi yung original. So yung mga transcript natin na from law school at yung diploma po natin, yun, i-attach po rin natin yun. Tapos certified copies of evidence of professional experience and admission certificate, good standing certificate, practicing certificate, reference letter. So ito po yung mga documents na nagpapakita na may legal experience po tayo sa Philippines. So ito po yung mga certificate of employment. Yung admission certificate at good standing certificate, makukuha po natin yan sa Supreme Court. Kasi may makakapag-request po tayo sa Supreme Court ng certificate of good standing at admission for the purpose of filing ng assessment sa New Zealand mismo. May nakalagay, may application letter po sa Supreme Court na for what country yung good standing certificate na request po natin. Pero important, bago tayo pupunta sa Supreme Court, kailangan po muna natin dumaan sa IBP. Kailangan po muna natin mag-request ng good standing muna sa IBP kasi hinihingi po yun ng Supreme Court.
Okay, so IBP first before Supreme Court.
IBP muna, tapos bago Supreme Court.
I've heard, Ben, kasi during my time, nag-accept sila ng local chapter ng IBP. So ngayon, hindi na daw. Tama ba yun?
Yun ang hindi ako sure. Pero in my case, sa IBP Ortigas ako nag-request muna. So sa main, bago ako pumunta sa Supreme Court.
Okay. Sige.
Tapos, yung may requirement din nakalagay kasi dito, certified copy of IELTS results. Pero, ang based sa communication sa NZCLE, itong IELTS na requirement, nire-require lang nila ito pag minsan after assessment na lang. So, pwede natin, hindi mo na itong i-submit yung IELTS result, hintayin mo natin yung assessment nila sa legal qualification natin, tapos sila na magsasabi kung kailangan natin ng IELTS or hindi, which is an English examination.
Okay.
Kasi most ng mga Filipino lawyers na nagpa-assess niyan, hindi pina-require ng IELTS result.
Okay.
IELTS
Ako rin, wala akong kilala, Ben, na Filipino lawyer na nagpa-assess na hininga ng IELTS or English exam eh. Okay? Okay. Ano sinabit mo dito? Di ba may sinabit ka dito about English exam?
Sinabit ko lang yung certification ng medium of instruction ng law school, pati ng undergrad.
Okay.
Tapos sa cover letter ko, sinama ko yung provision ng Constitution na part ng English sa medium of instruction.
Di ba?
Nalimutan ko lang yung specific. Basta sinama ko yun para lang may basis.
Okay. Sige. Tapos
So,
yung last, Ben, ano yung last requirement?
Extracts of law school handbook. Kasi important to, I think, kasi kailangan nila makita yung structure ng pagtuturo ng sa law school natin. So important yung course length and content for courses. Pero in my case, wala kasi ako nakuhang law school handbook. Nag-request na lang ako sa registrar's office namin ng course description ng mga law subjects na kinuha ko. At yun yung sinubmit ko. Tapos may letter from the dean na nag-certify lang na yun mga subjects na yun yung nakuha ko nung time na nasa law school ako. So,
okay. So parang course syllabus. So parang course syllabus siya in effect. Okay.
Yes. Pero kung makakuha tayo ng law school handbook, itago nyo na. Huwag nyo muna itapon. Tago nyo muna. Kasi importante pala.
And I think also important dito ata yung mga law school handbook o yung course description, it should be specific to the year when you graduated. Kasi at the time nung ako hiningi nila yung the year I graduated eh. But ako din, buti natago ko rin yung akin eh. At the time. Kasi fresh grad din ako noon. Kaya meron ako. Diba? And
The handbook, kailangan magre-relate siya dun sa period kung kailan tayo nag-aral. Hindi siya pwede yung pinaka-latest na handbook. Kailangan talaga siya yung law school handbook nung time nag-aral tayo.
okay. Now going to the assessment, Ino, ikaw kaka-receive mo lang nito. I think you should be able to share about this one,
Yeah, okay. So yung assessment ko kasi, yung assessment kasi, it's either i-require ka na kumuha ng New Zealand degree subjects or New Zealand law and practice examination. Tapos professional legal studies course and yung na-discuss kanina na English language. So in my case, yung New Zealand degree subject, hindi ako ni-require. So wala akong kailangang i-take sa among the 6 na nire-require nila, except that kailangan kong i-take yung New Zealand law and practice examination sa lahat ng parts na yan. Pero itong 6 parts exam na to, 3 dito is open notes or books, and yung other 3 hindi open book. So yung contract, criminal law, and public law, open books yun. Yung torts, property law, and equity and trust, yun yung closed notes.
Okay. So that's correct now. Kasi ako during my time, everything's closed book. So and until now, I think they still practice na 2 questions lang ang exam. So pwede rito ang shotgun method. Kumbaga, ano talaga, just show them that you've read and you're able to tie everything up. Kumbaga. And then, and ang passing rate sa New Zealand exams nito is 50%. So, syempre sa atin, sanay tayo na 75. So, 50% is very achievable. Now, meron din parang policy sila na if you pass all 5 except 1, you can file for what they call a compassionate, ask for on compassionate grounds to pass all the remaining exam na hindi mo napapasa. So pwedeng ganon. Medyo lenient sila pagdating doon. And in my case, si Ino kasi pwede siya ma-exam all 6. But in my case, more than 10 years ago, I was allowed to take exams yung all 5 except for equity and trust. Kasi, of course, New Zealand is a British system, former British colony. So all the laws, all the statutes are mostly British in tradition and yung sources. Of course, we are mix of American and Spanish. So medyo hindi parang based on the course description in my school natin, Rosa. So ni-require ako mag-aral ng equity and trust for 1 year. So I did that for 1 year of studying sa law school na 2 hours a week. And then, pwede nga pumasok midterms finals lang. So walang recitation, walang nothing na lang, midterms finals. And kumbaga walang sinabi sa well, di ko naman minamalit, pero I'm just saying na compared to the training and the studies that we had in the Philippines, syempre mas relatively mas manageable siya. I want to say I'm being discreet in saying manageable in terms of studying and passing the exam. Now, there is a requirement as well for professional legal studies course for yung mga applicants na walang legal experience or they haven't practiced in the Philippines, like myself and si Ino. So we haven't practiced in the Philippines, so we were required to take a professional legal course. It's I think it was at least 3 months study, and you learn about the practical stuff, yung appearing in court, yung drafting documents, yung how to interview clients, how to draft a will, yung mga practical skills and techniques na you don't learn in law school. So they teach you how to build clients, mga ganon. So more on the practice side ng pagiging lawyer. And also the professional legal studies courses would also be required sa mga law graduates. So even if you're not a bar passer, you can have your qualifications assessed. So kung hindi ka bar passer, or under BARCA, they would require you definitely a professional legal studies course. And from the people I've talked to, from the Filipinos I've talked to, yung mga nagpa-assess, those with at least 3 years work experience, NZCLE do not require yung professional legal studies course. So yun ata yung, well, there's no written rule about the 3 years, pero I think that's the minimum amount of experience to be exempted for the professional legal studies course. Now, yung cost nito, how much is it now for the exams?
Di ko maalala exactly, pero nasa 800 plus per part.
Okay, 800 part.
830, something like that.
Pero you also have the option to study everything in law school ito. And to study in law school, if you're an international student, I think it would cost, well, I think it's around 3,000 to 4,000 per subject, New Zealand dollars. Pero if you're a resident or citizen, mga 500 lang ata, I think, per subject. Tapos ano pa, student loan, study now, pay later. If you're a citizen or a resident. Okay? Contract is ano lang yan, oblicon, di ba? Torts, criminal law, of course, criminal law, public law, ito, if you're a policy graduate, mamaniin nyo lang to, public law. Property law is, civil code din yan, very, equity and trust, again, it's British in origin. So, these are the 6 main core subjects if you're gonna study law school in New Zealand. Everything else is elective, kumbaga. So yan yung parang, that's why yung mga overseas trained lawyers, they ask them to study those or take exams on those 6 core subjects. Okay?
May add lang ako.
Yeah.
If yung assessment nyo is to take an exam or New Zealand degree, or i-take yung New Zealand degree subject, hindi mo pwedeng pagpalitin. Na instead na mag-exam na lang ako, mag-aral na lang ako nung subject na yan. Kasi may nakalagay dun sa important
Binago ng rules. Dati pwede pa.
sa next schedule nakalagay.
Okay,
Please note,
yeah.
you cannot do an equivalent degree subject instead of a part of NZLPE if required without the written consent of the council. So, kailangan magpaalam ulit.
Wow, okay.
So, hindi ko lang alam kung may matagal ulit yung process nun kasi medyo natagalan din sa assessment.
Okay. Sige. Now, next is admission. So, once you finish the exams, once you finish the studies and all the requirements, you will apply for what they call, certificate of completion from the NZCLE. And then, you would also apply ka ulit ng certificate of good standing na kasi medyo sometimes matagal mo bago ma-complete. And then, you apply with the High Court of New Zealand to get admitted. So parang may affidavit, supporting documents, and then they will schedule you sa parang admission ceremony. And during admission ceremony, you have to have a moving counsel na tinatawag. So another lawyer who's admitted in New Zealand na parang who would vouch for you and would say, please admit him because he's a good character and good standing and he will be a good barrister solicitor in New Zealand. So parang ganun. Parang in front of the court, someone is vouching for you to be admitted. So individualize. So halimbawa kung 20 kayo ma-admit, 20 din yung moving counsel, parang tigi-isa-isa kayo. Or pwede rin dalawa yung isang moving counsel. Yung iba parang hindi dumating. So minsan nagdo-double up yung moving counsel. So that's how it goes. And meron lang ako finished product. Looks like this. So this was in 2008. Took me 1.5 years to take. And then yung wig and the robe, wala akong yan. You will rent it from a company and may signing of roles din. Wala lang si Attorney Layusa in front of you when you sign the roles. So yun yung parang that's during, after and during the ceremony. Now, Practising Certificate, they stopped the IDs 2012 kasi wala naman ata masyado kasi it's only optional. You don't have to get one. Pero they stopped in 2012 kasi medyo you have to pay for it. So yung iba ayaw magbayad. So they don't They don't issue yung mga yung mga IDs na yan. And you can't use this ID naman to anyone. Wala naman yung pag nahuli ka ng MMDA dito na pwede mong i-present yan. Hindi ganun. It doesn't work here. So that's why it's actually of no use in a way. It's only useful if you're appearing in courts. Kasi sometimes when you appear in courts or you're passing through the security of yung mga security ng courts, you just show them the ID. So I think that's the only time it's useful. But other than that, I've never used it in any way when I had one. And then yung practicing certificate, ito you renew your certificate every year and you can download it and you print it. So hindi naman mini-mail to. So you have an online account and then you just download your certificate every year when you pay for the certificate. Okay. Now, working as a lawyer, I think there are different options, just like in the Philippines, when you become and be admitted as a barrister and solicitor. Dito sa New Zealand, you can either be an employed solicitor or an employed barrister, meaning you have a senior lawyer na you would work under them, and then of course, just like any other firm, you are supervised by your employer or your supervising lawyer. You can also be an in-house counsel in companies or in government departments, just like in the Philippines. So parang Philippines, pero one siguro basic and major difference in practicing law in New Zealand, I think, is yung specializations. Kasi sa Philippines meron tayong mga generalist lawyers who can practice any area of law. Unlike in New Zealand, well, it's a practice and it's a common thing na lawyers specialize in a specific field. Na you cannot be a jack of all trades. That's why when you say you're an immigration specialist, you practice immigration only. Okay, just like in my case, I work in a immigration specialist law firm, so we practice only immigration. No way. So merong commercial lawyers, may property lawyers, may tax lawyers. So I think it's very specialized and it's very observed din kung ano yung, and it's also very hard to shift from one area of law to another. Kasi of course laws do change and you have to be updated. And that goes into yung CLE. Dito sa New Zealand, they only impose the continuing legal education, MCLE natin, sa Philippines. They only impose this siguro for the past less than 5 years pa lang ini-impose. And you're only required 10 hours per year. So, napakadali. Ako lagi ako sumusobra dyan. 10 hours. And kung sumobra ka sa 10 hours, makikredit pa siya the next year. So, ganun ka, in a way, medyo relax ang CLE. And of course, you have to choose the CLE or the courses that you attend. Like in my case, I only attend immigration courses or updates kasi those are the courses or the updates that are relevant to my practice. Okay? Now, yung practicing on your own account in New Zealand, you cannot set up your own law firm unless and until you have at least 3 years work experience. So yun yung basic requirement. So di gata sa Philippines wala namang ganong ata requirement. You can, kahit fresh graduate ka, you can set up your own law firm. Sa New Zealand hindi pwede. And before you can set up your own law firm, you have to undertake it's a 2-month course. Merong mga modules and you have a panel interview from 3 senior lawyers from the Law Society. So, yung para kang ginigrill, parang why do you want to set up your own? Are you confident enough? What areas of law do you want to practice? So, yun yung parang may screening committee before you can set up your own law firm sa New Zealand. In a way, so regulated. So, para hindi yung, kaya once you have established and set up your own, that means you have been approved by Law Society. You are good enough. You can stand on your own. Yun parang ganun ang dating sa when you can have your own law firm in New Zealand. Okay. Now, Now, actually, this should be the first part ng aming presentation, but I think, of course, kahit matapos nyo lahat ng mga requirements, even if you get admitted, the question is, how can you practice in New Zealand? Diba? Or how can you go to New Zealand if you want to take the exams then? So there are different pathways that we can suggest kasi, well, of course now, New Zealand borders are closed. We cannot suggest any pathway, but of course we can tell you the pathway so you can prepare once the New Zealand borders would open. And I think from the hints or the announcements that we get, walang definite dates, pero the hints that we are getting is that they might open it next year na, depending on the COVID-19 situation in other countries. Of course, as it's all over the news naman na New Zealand is zero COVID in terms of community transmission. Pero of course, may nakakatch sila mga COVID in terms of yung mga bagong dating, they isolate them. So doon yung mga COVID positive. But so far, sa awa ng Diyos, ilang days sa ba, Ben and Ino, na zero community transmission? I think it's more than 3 months na, no? Tama ba? Okay, so zero community transmission. So of course, New Zealand is trying to protect that reputation na zero community transmission in New Zealand. And well, they're doing their best. May mga of course, yung managing the borders talaga is the key in catching COVID. And of course, it was also in the news na yung New Zealand, we went into lockdown for 1 month. 1 month or 6 weeks, I forgot. Everything was closed except for mga essential business like supermarkets and hospitals. Yun lang yung open. So everyone were required to stay at home. So yun lang yung para kaming yung iba nababaliw na parang hindi makalabas, pero everyone sacrificed and it paid off na everyone stayed at home and na-control yung virus, and yun, that's where we are now, zero community transmission. Okay? Now, in terms of the pathways, Ben, do you want to talk about your pathway? Kasi this might be something that a lot of lawyers from the Philippines, mga kababayan natin, might be interested, and this is, I think, doable in terms of the pathway, yung ginawa mo, Ben?
Okay. Sa case ko po, ang ginawa ko, nag-apply ako ng Masters of Laws dito sa university dito sa Oakland. So ang masters kasi dito 1 year lang. So after ko graduate dun sa master's program nila, nag-file ako ng work visa ko at nag-grant naman ako ng 3 years work visa. Pero in terms dun sa filing ng application for assessment sa legal qualification, nag-file ako right after ko nakuha yung diploma ko sa Masters of Laws ko. Kasi ang purpose ko nun ay para masama ko rin siya, yung Masters of Laws ko dito, masama ko siya sa assessment ko sa legal qualification ko. Naisip ko kasi baka makatulong pa. Pero yun, nakuha ko yung Masters of Laws ko ng 1 year, right? Tapos after that, kumuha ako ng 3 years work visa.
Okay. Now, in terms of yung pathway ni Ben, so kasi sa immigration policy ng New Zealand, if you study a master's degree or doctorate, after finishing the course, you will be granted a 3 years work visa. And even while studying, you can bring your family. You can bring your spouse, and your spouse or partner will be on an open work visa. So pwede sila magtrabaho any job. And then children. So children between the ages of 5 to 18 will be on a student visa. They can study in any public school in New Zealand for free. Between 5 to 18, yung mga bata. Yung 0 to 4 na anak, student visa. So in a way, magkano na bang masters ngayon, Ben? If you don't mind, just to give our viewers idea.
Mga around 30,000 New Zealand dollars.
Okay. So 30,000 times 35 ba pesos ngayon ang conversion? So that's medyo malaki investment in terms of studying a master's degree, Masters of Law, I should say. but you can bring your whole family to New Zealand while the lawyer is studying. In the same manner, I also would advise, for example, kung ayaw mag-aral ni lawyer, then yung partner yung mag-aaral. Then, pwede rin naman. In terms of the partner, I would highly recommend to study a healthcare course kasi ang healthcare, it doesn't, ang daming vacancies ng healthcare sa New Zealand. Studying, especially now with the pandemic, so talagang very in demand yung healthcare. And of course, cheaper yung course in terms of health kasi 1 year. Yung master's talaga and doctorate, medyo mahal siya. But in terms of healthcare, it's also doable na yung partner yung mag-aaral. Kung single naman, maghanap ng kiwi, hindi, joke lang. Marami akong kilalang New Zealand farmers, hindi, joke. But it's also a pathway if you have a New Zealand partner here. But then again, of course, it's not a very common pathway, but in terms of yung getting a work visa to work in New Zealand, I think you can work in New Zealand even if you're not admitted as a legal secretary or as a paralegal. That would be a job as well for those who have not been admitted. Kaso, ang kalaban mo naman are the locals. Of course, when you apply for a work visa, you have to prove that you could not find any locals when you apply for your work visa. And yung legal secretary and admin jobs is one of those jobs na gusto ng mga locals or not in shortage. So, medyo mahirap siguro if you're gonna apply on your own on a work visa. So, in general, I think yung medyo practical pero expensive option is, if you can afford it, I think it's LLM, yung studying Masters of Law in New Zealand. Kasi parang guaranteed kayo ng 4 years in New Zealand eh. Kasi you study for 1 year and you get a 3 years work visa. Okay? So, yun lang yung requirement kasi to get the 3 years work visa is for you to have completed the course. Yun lang. And of course, passing the medical checks and passing criminal checks. Yun naman yung basic requirements. Very particular sila with criminal convictions in New Zealand. And yung if you are healthy, yung common test na ginagawa, just like any medical in other countries, siguro yung yung tuberculosis, parang takot na takot sa TB ang New Zealand. I don't know why. So one of those number one diseases na kapag meron ka, they would decline your visa in New Zealand. But everything else, as long as the disease or the condition does not require ongoing medical treatment or medication, I think you can pass the medical exam in New Zealand. Okay? Well, we can discuss further about the immigration pathway, but again, as we have said, close by New Zealand borders. But if you are considering to study in New Zealand, I think the first step is to take the English exam, yung IELTS. Kasi sa mga student visa applications, number 1 requirement na yung IELTS. It's not a requirement in the assessment, but it's a requirement to study in New Zealand. Okay? I think that's the end of the presentation. Yun lang naman yung important points that we wanted to discuss. And if you have any questions, now, Glenn, Rosa, you can ask questions, pero dun sa live YouTube natin, I mean, those who are so viewers natin, they could type in their questions and we can read them and we'll try to answer them for those more specific questions. Okay? Ano, Glenn, Rosa, punta na ba dito?
Game na.
So, yun lang yung I mean, of course, gaya si Ben now, dahil may work visa siya, he can do it here, yung doing the qualification, doing assessment. Diba? So, that's also a possibility. Pero, hindi ko na nakalimutan ko nabanggit kanina yung ano ba yung job prospects of barristers and solicitors sa New Zealand. I think it's share ko na experience ko 2008 when I got admitted, even 27 while I was studying. Kasi during that time, hindi pa sikat ang mga Filipinos sa New Zealand. At maski ang mga Pilipino, hindi kilala ang New Zealand when I moved here. Di ba tinatanong ako, mga classmates natin, Glenn, saan ang New Zealand? Why New Zealand? I think it's not one of those first world countries na destination ng mga Filipinos. They always talk about US, Canada, or Australia, pero New Zealand is not on the radar sa mga Filipinos. Pero in terms of when I arrive in New Zealand, when I do get the interviews, I would get comments like, parang, where is the Philippines? Ganon, na during my interviews, or for someone who just arrived in New Zealand, you speak very good English. I would get those comments na, where is New Zealand? Where's the Philippines? Is that in China? So talagang hindi alam yung Filipino or Philippines during my time. Pero ngayon, sobrang dami na ng mga Pilipino sa New Zealand because of the nurses, because of the tradesmen, construction workers, mga welders, carpenters, ang dami, dairy farm workers, ang daming Pilipino. So I think the Filipino community is gaining strength in numbers and they're getting popular among employers in a way. So parang ganun yung market in terms of the geography or parang demographic I should say ng Filipinos in New Zealand. Now for lawyers, it's also a job na very common with locals na I think we were discussing before, Ben, and na merong oversupply of lawyers in New Zealand kasi it's a popular course or profession among locals. Locals meaning mga New Zealanders. Pero if you have the skills or ability, I think I know some lawyers from the Philippines, even not admitted, who were able to enter into government. Yung mga specialized na fields na very pasok sa na skills ng mga Pilipino at ng hinahanap ng employer. We also have like multinational firms here, like halimbawa si Ben, it came from Pricewaterhouse, diba? So meron mga overseas branches dito, so if he wanted to, he could apply as well sa mga accounting or auditing firms. Again, it really depends on your experience and your skills in a way. Okay? May questions ba? O masyado akong maliwanag mag-explain?
Kailangan pala i-mention dun yung sa assessment for legal qualification, yung time noon ay mga 16 weeks nakalagay dun sa document nila. Pero syempre, may chances na madidelay. Especially nung nangyari itong COVID, maraming applications na delay, including na yun sa amin din.
Okay. May question dito from Estela. How much to prepare daw for the accommodation and other expenses na to expect?
Kasi depende
while
rin
studying, tinatanong niya, Ben.
Yung sa accommodation naman, depende talaga kung anong klaseng accommodation yung kukunin. Yung it's either kukuha ka ng sarili mong bahay or kukuha ka lang ng isang room. So kung kukuha lang ng isang room, medyo mura-mura yun. Mga around $130 to $200. Pero a week yun.
Kasi dito everything is paid by weekly eh.
Weekly yung mga rent dito. So, yun yung mas cheaper kung room lang yung kukunin. Pero kung kukuha ka ng isang bahay talaga, yun, medyo mahal na yun.
Question ng Ben, how would you compare studying masters in New Zealand compared to studying in the Philippines?
Dito kasi sa New Zealand, yung pagtuturo nila ng law subjects, hindi katulad sa atin na parang papasok ka pa lang sa classroom, takot na tayo. Kasi dito walang recitation, puro voluntary. Tinatanong ng teachers kung sino gusto recite, kung sino makakasagot sa questions nila. At doon sa case ko kasi sa pagkuha ng masters, yung pag-grade nila sa akin based lang sa research papers na sinabit ko. So bale, sa end ng semester, kailangan ko lang magsabit ng isang research paper per subject.
Okay. How many
Kung
subjects were there?
master,
How many subjects yun, Ben?
yung sa akin, 4 na subjects yung kinuha ko. So 4 na research papers yung nasabit ko in the year.
Okay. Tinanong din niya yung about part-time work while studying.
Yeah. Kung kasi pag nag-aaral ka dito sa New Zealand, kailangan mo may student visa ka. At nakalagay dun sa student visa po natin na conditions niya ay 20 hours of work lang pwede per week. So, yung mga students po na under student visa, allowed lang sila to work 20 hours a week.
Mhm. Okay.
Pero kung nasama mo yung partners nyo or spouses nyo dito po, sila yung makakuha ng open work visa.
So you can work for any employer anywhere in New Zealand. So maski mag 200 hours sila, 5
Okay.
employers, walang limit.
Yun yung advantage nun. Kung
Mm.
student visa yung principal applicant.
Mm. Okay. So yun lang naman yung questions online. Okay, mukhang wala namang hearing ngayon, Rosa, di ba? Glenn, may
Sarado ang court.
sarado ba ang courts? Okay.
Mm-mm.
Sige. I think yun lang ang question. So, ayos. So, wala masyadong questions.
Yeah.
So, yun lang. Again, it's kasi sikat ang New Zealand ngayon eh. I mean, it's not only in the Philippines. I think it's worldwide na sikat ang New Zealand. That's why ako, because I practice immigration, I do get a lot of random emails from people from the US, from Middle East, from Asia, asking how to migrate to New Zealand. I do get that almost siguro every week, random person, random client. But as I've said, close ang borders sa New Zealand. So pero ang pinipredict naman namin diyan in terms of our law firm, once the borders do open, diyan dagsaan yung mga applications. And I think you should, if you're really interested in migrating to, for example, in New Zealand or anywhere in the globe, I think do some research, know about the country na gusto nyong i-migrate, and prepare, or even also learn on the job prospects. Kasi unless na ikaw yung tipong you can do any job or happy to do any kind of job, and depende rin sa sa tao. Pero yun nga lang, if I just want to also emphasize, especially yung mga abogado sa Pilipinas, if you are already a boss on your own, if you are already a senior partner or whatever, just be prepared to work from the bottom. Bottom meaning assistant or what in a law firm, kasi you will not get the same treatment or the same job you used to in the Philippines. Especially in New Zealand kasi dito, hindi uso ang mga titles eh. Hindi uso yung mga, sa atin, attorney ganyan, engineer ganyan, architect ganyan. Dito sa New Zealand, parang they don't attach a title to your name. Like even your employers, we call our employers, our bosses by the first name. We don't call them sir, we don't call them ma'am, or you don't even get to be called attorney here. I think it's only mga Filipinos sa New Zealand yung tinatawag ang attorney dito sa New Zealand. Pero if you talk to locals, if you go to mingle with other people, they don't call you attorney, walang ganun eh. So I think that's very one important thing na I think that's very that's one of the things I like about New Zealand. Parang pantay-pantay din lahat. Whatever you do, parang you're all equals. And if you're working and if you're earning a living, parang kaya mong kainin yung gusto mo in a way. Kahit even if you're in minimum wage, kaya mong mag-steak araw-araw, kaya mong mag-ubas araw-araw. Alam mo yun, parang it doesn't matter. Of course, it depende sa budget, pero I think I'm just being I'm just exaggerating, but my point is maganda dito sa New Zealand, pantay-pantay lahat. If you're earning a living, that's yun yung pinaka-importante lang. Titles don't matter, professions don't matter, or parang kahit school ka sa kagaling, doesn't matter. Pantay-pantay dito sa New Zealand. Okay? Yun. Sige, I think I'll end this seminar. I think we've answered some of the questions, but if you have specific questions, feel free to visit our website. May website naman kami, bagsiclaw.co.nz, and which can navigate your way through in terms of how your pathway going to New Zealand is. But again, it's on a case-to-case basis. Parang hindi lahat naman i-force namin to be admitted as a lawyer. Kasi halimbawa, your partner might be more suitable or more employable dito sa New Zealand. So again, we have to assess on a case-to-case basis then. So I think that's the end of our discussion. So again, thank you, Ino and Ben, for discussing your thoughts. Kasi alam ko kayong you're the two people na talagang very recent experience with having assessments and doing all those qualifications to become a lawyer. And Rosa, Glenn, and Lulu, thank you for joining the Zoom meeting, and hope to see you soon. Okay.
Thank you for having us. The seminar was very informative, especially for those who are listening right now. So if you are interested to migrate to New Zealand, please don't hesitate to get in touch with our very handsome lawyer from New Zealand, Attorney Jean Bagsic. And also,
libre,
of course,
promotion.
First classmate, of course. And we would like to thank also Ben and Ino for guiding us, especially those who are listening in this seminar. So thank you, Ino and Ben. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you.